Malik Thompson arrived at Hawthorne College's stately brick quad just as the morning mist began to lift, nerves coiling in his stomach with every step toward Langley Hall. He had rehearsed his point all week, defending street art not as vandalism, but as a living dialogue with history. But nothing could steady him for what came next. The oak door swung open to reveal the seminar room's polished wood floors and a semicircle of students perched behind folding desks. At the far end, Professor Langley clicked through slides of Renaissance frescoes, his tone measured and precise. When the lecture turned to modern interventions on public walls, Malik raised his hand. His palm itched with the familiar weight of curiosity and conviction. "Professor," he began, voice firm yet respectful, "with all due respect, street art can convey complex social critiques." Langley cut him off mid-sentence, index finger raised as though to hush a street corner mural's spray can. "Mr. Thompson," he said, voice cool and clipped, "this is an art history class, not a sociology debate. Save your activist rhetoric for another forum." The rebuke landed heavier than any slap. Malik's cheeks burned as he sank back into his seat, but the urge to speak would not let him rest. When Langley described graffiti as undisciplined and inferior to academic practice, Malik could hold silent no longer. "Sir," he stood again, heart pounding, "with all due respect, dismissing street art overlooks its innovation and its power to engage communities that formal institutions ignore." Before he could finish, the room's door swung open and two campus security officers stepped in. The dean, flanked by administrative aides, offered Malik a curt nod. "Mr. Thompson," she said in a voice that brooked no argument, "Professor Langley informs me you have disrupted his lecture. Please gather your belongings and come with us." Shock paralyzed him as Langley watched impassively. Textbooks slid from Malik's desk to the floor as he scrambled to collect them, glancing at classmates whose eyes ranged from pity to discomfort. His scholarship, his place in the class, even his ability to register next semester, all felt suddenly in peril. Malik followed the officers out of the room, head held high despite the sting of expulsion, determined that no single corridor, no matter how venerable, could silence the voices he carried in his art. By midday, the video of Malik's forcible removal had exploded across campus networks. A student in the back row had captured his final words, "Art speaks where walls cannot," and posted them to Instagram, where the clip looped under the hashtag #ExpellTheCensor. Within hours, the hashtag trended on Hawthorne's internal social platform, Quad Talk, and spilled over into public channels on Twitter and TikTok, drawing likes and shares from students, alumni, and local residents alike. In the student union, flyers announcing a solidarity march for free expression appeared overnight. Crisp sheets of paper bearing a stencil portrait of Malik spray-painted against the college seal. By Thursday morning, several hundred students, black, white, and every hue in between, assembled at the wrought iron gates, chanting, "No lecture without debate, no learning without free speech." Leaders from the campus's African American Student Union, the Art History Club, and the Graduate Teaching Assistants Federation coordinated megaphones handing out pocket-sized editions of Malik's public statement. "I stand for art that bridges worlds, not walls that divide. If my voice is silenced here, I will find the streets, and the streets will listen." A petition on change.org, titled "Reinstate Malik Thompson and Protect Academic Freedom at Hawthorne College," accrued over 25,000 signatures in 48 hours, including endorsements from prominent street artists, civil liberties organizations, and even a Nobel laureate in literature. The college's switchboard flooded with calls demanding accountability. Local news crews arrived to film the growing crowd as they drummed on overturned buckets and recited passages of Langley Hall's charter on open inquiry. Inside the administration building, the president's office strove for calm. A flurry of emails between deans and legal counsel debated whether to justify the expulsion as enforcing classroom protocols or risk the political firestorm by rescinding the order. Meanwhile, campus security reports documented escalating tensions. A peaceful sit-in at the dean's office, a spontaneous Chalk the Walls event outside Langley Hall where students scrolled quotes from Malcolm X and Frida Kahlo, and a small group of performance artists reenacting Malik's removal in mime. Amid the uproar, Malik watched from the steps of a nearby library, flanked by friends and strangers who had come to bear witness. He carried no paint cans or brick walls, only the resolute calm of someone who knew his words had already taken root. As chanting soared and his petition count soared even higher, Malik realized that though he had been expelled from the lecture hall, he had become the pulse of a movement demanding that art, and the voices behind it, be heard everywhere, under cover of darkness. Malik slipped away from the university district toward the city's historic arts quarter, a neighborhood of cobblestone alleys and brick tenement walls layered in decades of forgotten murals. His heart pounded with both fear and exhilaration as he navigated puddle-dappled side streets, each turn revealing walls tagged with peeling stencils and faded paste-ups. He carried 4 spray cans in a battered backpack: neon orange, electric blue, stark white, and deep black, his only tools to reclaim a voice he believed was rightfully his. Finding a long, uninterrupted stretch of brick behind an abandoned textile loft, Malik set down his bag and pulled out a roll of painter's tape to sketch his first outline. He worked quickly, marking large, sweeping letters that would read, "Art belongs to the streets." Shadows danced around him as a lone street lamp cast a halo on the rough mortar. He shook the neon orange can, the metallic rattle echoing off the walls, and with a swift hiss of propellant, he filled in the letters with bold strokes that glowed like embers against the dark brick. Next, he tackled a more ambitious piece, a reimagining of Botticelli's Birth of Venus. But instead of a clamshell, his Venus rose from a spray paint cap, her hair a riot of multicolored drips and her hand clutching a can. Using electric blue for her figure and white for highlights, Malik blended gradients directly on the wall, guiding the paint with practiced swirls. He stepped back, then knelt to add deep black outlines that gave the mural crisp definition, tracing every curve of her form with the precision of a brushstroke in reverse. As he worked, sirens wailed distantly, but Malik remained focused. He moved to a narrower side alley and sprayed a stencil silhouette of a young child splitting with a crowbar through a brick panel, symbolizing the power of art to break down barriers. He tagged beneath it in small cursive, "Walls speak, will you listen?" Before dawn, he crouched to sign his piece with a simple tag, Malik plus Streets, then melted back into the shadows. News of his nocturnal gallery spread by morning across local art blogs and hyperlocal news feeds. Photographs of each mural, shot by intrigued passers-by, popped up on Instagram and Twitter, the hashtag #WallsSpeak accompanying shares and comments. Art critics praised the unexpected dialogue between classical reference and urban grit, while community organisers saw in Malik's work a rallying cry for public expression. By dusk, the city's arts district pulsed with anticipation. Curious art lovers, students, and journalists converged on the alleys, cameras in hand, eager to witness the anonymous artist who had turned the cityscape into his manifesto. In the crowd, Malik watched from a shadowed corner, painted walls aglow in the golden hour light, feeling more heard than he had ever been inside any lecture hall. Under the cover of a moonless night, an unmarked van slipped down the railroad embankment to a warehouse tucked beneath the city's elevated tracks. Inside, the cavernous space smelled of sawdust and machine oil. An old textile mill long abandoned, its iron columns pocked with rust and its concrete floor streaked with decades of paint drips. A single strand of festoon lights zigzagged overhead, casting a warm glow on rows of salvaged scaffolding and plywood panels that now framed Malik's murals as if in a clandestine gallery. A hush settled over the 30 or so attendees as they filed through a narrow side door, their breath visible in the cool air. Local street art pioneers in paint-spattered coveralls nodded to one another, while art students in tattered denim jackets whispered with excitement. Curators from edgy underground collectives, tall figures in black turtlenecks, jotted notes in small leather notebooks. At the far end, a makeshift bar crafted from old shipping crates offered strong coffee and spiced cider to ward off the night chill. The first panel revealed "Art belongs to the streets" in neon orange, a declaration so bold it seemed to vibrate against the brick. Spectators leaned in, tracing the crisp edges of the letters with their eyes, murmuring about the precision of Malik's technique and the audacity of repurposing industrial decay as a canvas. Nearby, His Birth of Venus mural drew a small crowd, cameras flashing at each sinuous contour of the spray-painted goddess. One curator remarked to his companion, "He captures the lineage from classical to contemporary so seamlessly. It's as though the Louvre itself has been transposed here." At the center of the floor, an improvised stage held a projector streaming footage of Malik's lecture hall expulsion, looping his final words. "Art speaks where walls cannot." The audio crackled through a borrowed PA system, its echo mingling with the scent of latex paint. As viewers watched the indignity he suffered, frowns and clenched jaws gave way to determined nods. A student activist from the campus reform movement slipped out of the crowd to hand out laminated flyers announcing the next day's campus rally. Throughout the evening, visitors explored more hidden corners. A side room where Malik's small stencil piece, "Walls Speak, Will You Listen?" sat beside scans of ancient Roman graffiti, and a darkened alcove where a time-lapse projection showed each. Mural's creation can beckon drips of color coalescing into defiant statements. Overhead, the festoon lights reflected in spilled puddles, turning the space into a fractured kaleidoscope of color and shadow. As dawn approached, the curator who had arranged the exhibition, a softly spoken woman known only as Renee, took the makeshift microphone. "Tonight," she began, voice steady in the hushed hall, "you have witnessed not just art, but a revolution of expression. Malik Thompson has reclaimed these walls for all of us who believe in the power of voice over silence." Applause rippled through the space like the swell of a tide. When the last attendee slipped away into the pre-dawn fog, Malik remained alone amid the panels, tracing his signature tag on the plywood with a gloved fingertip. In the quiet aftermath, the warehouse felt less abandoned and more alive, charged with the electricity of every eye that had studied his work. Packing up paint cans and tarps, Malik felt the weight of the morning's vindication, from the forced expulsion of a classroom to an underground sanctuary where his art spoke for 1,000 silenced voices. That week, a crisp email arrived in Malik's inbox from an address ending in Louvre FR. The subject line simply read, "Invitation, Résidence d'Artiste, Louvre, Paris." He stared at the message in disbelief. An offer to install his street murals inside the museum's rarely used Galerie des Fresques, a long corridor tucked behind the Grande Galerie. The sender was Hélène Marchand, curator of contemporary interventions, whose previous work had brought Banksy and JR to Paris. On Monday morning, Malik stepped off the TGV at Gare de Lyon, the city unfolding in a blur of Haussmann facades and wrought-iron balconies. A black Peugeot awaited him on the platform, a driver holding a placard with his name. In the back seat, Malik's heart pounded as the car wove through the Jardin des Plantes and past Notre Dame. He rehearsed his plan: 3 large murals, each reimagining a canonical Louvre artwork as a conversation between museum and street. At the museum's rear entrance, long corridors of echoing stone led him to the Galerie des Fresques. The gallery's 50-foot walls, usually empty, were bathed in soft LED track lighting. Scaffolding stood ready in 3 equidistant bays. Marchand greeted Malik in a tailored navy suit, her blonde hair pinned neatly. "Welcome, Malik," she said in accented English. "We believe your Ivy to Asphalt series will challenge and enrich our vistas of art and public space." Malik and Marchand inspected the first bay, a blank expanse of 18th century limestone blocks, each marked with chalk lines indicating where the Mona Lisa mural would go. Malik unpacked his aerosol paints, neon orange, cobalt blue, arsenic green, and set up high-reach sprayer attachments. Marchand stood by as Malik unrolled full-scale stencils printed on translucent vellum. His reinterpretation of Leonardo's portrait with a spray paint halo and the words "Echo Vivant" over the background. At precisely noon, the Louvre's cafe below began its lunchtime rush, and through narrow vents, the faint hum of chatter seeped into the gallery. Malik loaded orange paint into his nozzle and began filling the halo, each pass of the spray gun emitting a soft hiss. Within minutes, the chalk outlines glowed in vibrant contrast to the limestone. He switched to blue to render the famous landscape behind Lisa's shoulders into geometric street art shapes, triangles and zigzags that echoed urban cityscapes. Over the next 2 days, Malik moved to the second bay. Here, he conflated the winged victory of Samothrace with graffiti drips. The marble statuette's wings emerged from splashes of black and white paint that trailed down the wall like molten rock. He used cobalt for the drips and highlighted the folds of Victory's chiton with arsenic green, the metallic sheen catching the LED lights. Marchand measured each hue with a spectrophotometer to ensure museum-grade color fidelity. By the third evening, Malik tackled the final piece, a street art tribute to Jacques-Louis David's The Raft of the Medusa. In his vision, the doomed ship became a spray paint stencil canoe, painted in high-contrast monochrome beneath a sky hastily, tagged with neon slogans, "Art is revolt, break the frame." He hand-cut each stencil, aligning dozens of layers to capture the painting's chaotic drama. When the last layer slid into place and Malik stepped back, Marchand exclaimed, "It is as if the walls themselves cry out for justice." On Friday, the Louvre's press office issued a terse but sensational press release. Louvre opens doors to street. Art, Malik Thompson's Galerie des Fresques residency. Within hours, the museum's website listed a virtual tour, and ticket sales spiked for the experimental wing. International art magazines ran features titled "When Street Meets Stone," the Louvre's bold new dialogue. Visitors streamed through the galleries, smartphones raised, recording their astonishment as they moved from the original masterpieces to Malik's vibrant interventions just steps away. As Malik packed his last cans and prepared to return to New York, he walked the length of the Galerie des Fresques one final time. Mixed in with the whispers of tourists and the click of DSLR shutters, he heard genuine gasps of wonder. In that hushed corridor, far from any crackling sidewalk or echoing lecture hall, Malik realized he had not only reclaimed his voice, but had built a bridge between two worlds, proving that art no longer needed walls to speak its truth. By the time Malik returned to New York, the world's eyes were on both him and Hawthorne College. News outlets ran features on the Louvre residency, and social media feeds flooded with images of classical masterpieces remixed with Malik's street art flourishes. Within days, Hawthorne's president issued a public statement, acknowledging the value of diverse artistic expression and inviting Malik back to campus, scholarship intact, to complete his degree under a new creative dialogue initiative co-led by the Art History and Fine Arts departments. Reinstatement and scholarship. On a crisp Monday morning, Malik strode through the ivy-clad arches of Hawthorne College once more, a letter of reinstatement in hand. In the dean's ornate wood-panelled office, he met with Dr. Evelyn Cho, the newly appointed Vice Provost for Academic Freedom. She presented him with a restored tuition grant and announced the launch of the Thompson Fellowship in Public Art, an endowed fund to support student-led murals and community art projects. As faculty and fellow students gathered in the corridor, Malik felt the campus's atmosphere shift from tension to celebration. Completion of the Ivy to Asphalt thesis. Assigned to mentor him was Professor Lara Ruiz, an expert in contemporary art whose own work bridged gallery spaces and street interventions. Together, they refined his capstone thesis, now titled Ivy to Asphalt, Dialogues Between Institutional and Public Art. Malik incorporated high-resolution photographs of his clandestine murals, installation blueprints from the warehouse exhibition, and analytic essays on the Louvre Commission's reception. The written component wove his personal narrative with critical theory, arguing for the necessity of art as active civic discourse beyond museum walls. Defense and honors. At a packed thesis defense in the college's historic Great Hall, Malik presented his research to a panel of professors, art historians, sociologists, and visiting curators from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. He walked the audience through each project phase: the lecture hall expulsion, the guerrilla murals, the underground exhibition, and the Louvre residency. Visual aids mapped his trajectory, and video clips captured public reactions from campus protests to Parisian gallery crowds. When he concluded, Dr. Ruiz rose and declared, "This is a work of scholarship and praxis that will shape Hawthorne's art curriculum for years to come." The panel awarded him highest distinction, and the audience erupted in applause. permanent exhibits, and curriculum changes. In the semester that followed, Hawthorne College installed permanent reproductions of Malik's street art designs in the campus art gallery, alongside archival footage of his public works. The Fine Arts Department introduced a new course, Graffiti to Galleries, co-taught by Malik and Professor Ruiz, guiding students through workshops on stencil making, mural safety, and permit negotiations. Enrollment doubled, drawing undergraduates eager to engage in community-oriented art. Public art in the city. Meanwhile, the Thompson Fellowship funded a series of sanctioned murals across the city. A bold tribute to immigrant labourers on a Lower East Side tenement, a kaleidoscopic portrait of community elders on a Brooklyn block, and an expansive four-story Art Belongs to the Streets mural on a Harlem youth centre. Malik oversaw each installation, mentoring student teams and liaising with local neighbourhood councils to ensure the projects honoured community identity, recognition and legacy. That spring, Malik was invited to deliver the commencement address for Hawthorne's graduating class. On a sunlit stage before a sea of caps and gowns, he spoke of art's power to bridge divides and amplify marginalized voices. "Let your creativity be a sledgehammer," he urged, "not to destroy, but to transform walls, literal and figurative, into invitations for dialogue." He received an honorary alumni award for excellence in civic art, joining the ranks of poets, scientists, and activists once celebrated by the college. A lasting bridge. As Malik walked off stage, diploma in hand, he reflected on the journey from that first stunned walk down Professor Langley's aisle to the global recognition that followed. Hawthorne's walls no longer represented barriers, but canvases for every student's voice. His thesis, murals, and the fellowship that bore his name ensured that future generations would carry forward the principle he had fought for, that art belongs to everyone, whether it hangs in a lecture hall, a warehouse, or the hallowed halls of the Louvre. 2 years after his defiant return to Hawthorne College, Malik Thompson stood beneath the vaulted glass ceiling of the newly opened Thompson Public Art Pavilion, a gleaming structure at the heart of campus dedicated entirely to community-driven mural projects. The pavilion's limestone walls were etched with quotes from Malik's journey. "Art speaks where walls cannot," and "Ivy to asphalt, dialogue through colour." At its centre, a rotating installation showcased live painting sessions streamed from cities around the world. Malik paused at the edge of the central gallery, where a panoramic mural, painted by students, alumni, and local residents, depicted the arc of his story. The raised hand in Professor Langley's seminar, the neon orange "Art Belongs to the Streets," lettering on a forgotten alley wall, and the Louvre's classical columns transformed by spray paint halos. Each panel was annotated with QR codes linking to oral histories, protest footage, and archival photographs, inviting visitors to explore the layered narratives behind every brushstroke. Behind him, Vice Provost Dr. Evelyn Cho approached with 24 students from the Graffiti to Galleries course. They wore paint-splattered lab coats and carried sketchbooks, ready for today's workshop on public mapping of murals in the city's historic districts. Malik greeted them with a warm nod, then led them to a touchscreen map on the pavilion's east wall. An interactive display tracking over 100 sanctioned public art sites created under the Thompson Fellowship, from Harlem's tenement blocks to Los Angeles' Arts District and Berlin's graffiti-rich Spree riverbanks. In the weeks since its inauguration, the pavilion had also hosted international collaborations. A delegation of muralists from Sao Paulo had painted a capoeira-themed mural. A collective from Mumbai had contributed a tapestry-style piece celebrating women's voices, and a group of indigenous artists from Canada had added traditional motifs to the rotating exhibit. Malik saw their work as extensions of the same conversation, art as a living, borderless dialogue. That afternoon, Malik shared the pavilion's opening stage with Helene Marchand, now a frequent collaborator, and Professor Lara Ruiz. Together, they announced the Global Dialogues in Public Art Symposium, a year-long series of residencies, lectures, and pop-up workshops in 10 cities worldwide. Malik described his vision. "From the moment I was silenced in that lecture hall, I believed that art could build bridges stronger than any brick wall. Today, this pavilion stands as a testament to the power of community creativity to reshape institutions and ignite global solidarity. As dusk settled, artists and students gathered for a live painting jam beneath the pavilion's skylight. There, voices rising with laughter and paint-splattered overalls catching the golden light. Malik stepped back, observing the scene. The barriers he once faced had transformed into platforms for every emerging voice. In those shared strokes and colours, he recognized the true legacy of his journey. Not the inches of brick he had covered with spray paint, nor the hallowed halls he had briefly occupied, but the countless walls yet to be painted by artists emboldened to speak, to question, and to connect the world through art.